When I get indicted, I find out all the cooperating witnesses against us, dozens of them, dozens. We were dead. It wasn't 99.9%. It was 100% we're going to jail for the rest of our life.
Yeah.
But I still didn't think about cooperating until my lawyer from New York comes up, John Mitchell, and tells me New York bosses are worried sick. I said, well, if the New York bosses are worried sick, what do you think I should be? I'm second on the indictment to a death penalty case.
This is Inside the Life with Giovanni and Dutch, produced by the Mob Museum. Giovanni, Rocco, and Dutch McAlpin are former police and federal task force operatives. They infiltrated drug cartels, outlaw motorcycle groups, and the mafia. Now, they share their stories, along with others who have gone inside the life.
So welcome back to Inside the Life. I'm Giovanni. I'm here with Dutch. This episode is with Anthony Arillotta. He is a former Springfield, Massachusetts Genovese crime family capo. He in this episode, he talked to us about his life growing up inside. He's generational. It's in his family. But he gave great perspective in this episode because this is one where it's unique for us here at the museum.
Anthony's very forthcoming and very transparent. He's not afraid to talk in detail about the violent crimes he was involved with, what the organization was about. Probably a very, very fascinating guest.
He was, and like I said, he gives a different perspective. We've never sat down. We've sat down with his associates. Mm-hmm. We haven't sat down with somebody on Inside the Life who's an actual made member in the family. He gave the perspective of the murder that he carried out. Mm-hmm. The cold heartedness. I mean, that's the way I took it.
No, but
but again, if you're doing that, and it's a little graphic in his description of it, but it is what it was, right? That's the life. And then he talked about the ceremony where he got promoted. He got proposed, which was great to have that perspective. There's no more guessing. He described the step by step what it looked like when he was proposed, what it looked like went to the ceremony. That was pretty neat.
I think it's interesting because, like you said, he's a made guy. So he's a gangster's gangster. He's committed a murder, attempted to commit a murder to get his button, to get made. And then he also talks about, as powerful and as violent as he was, his reasons for flipping, his reasons for turning government informant.
Yeah. His outreach, I didn't realize how far his outreach was until he explained it with us today. Like he didn't just stay in a hub of Springfield, Massachusetts.
No,
he
not
was
even
all
close.
over. He was Connecticut, he was New York, and that was unique to it, especially to be in such a big family. Genovese was one of the largest families at the time when he was operating. And we hope you enjoy this wild ride with a capo and a former Genovese soldier on Inside the Life. This is an opportunity for us. We've had guests on the show that were connected to Italian organized crime in the past. We've never really sat down with somebody that's a made guy and is truly giving us access. Mm-hmm. I know what it's like to have lived inside the life, right? My infiltration of the Italian organized crime, Dutch's association with me. We have a good understanding of it, but you give us a different perspective, and it's great to sit down and talk with you. But you were part of the Springfield crew, right? Springfield, Massachusetts?
The Springfield faction of the Genovese family. Right. So we're 2 hours from New York, and we're like a satellite, just like they had some Genovese guys in Jersey that are still, active there, and they have some in Florida. Mm-hmm. We have a big branch out in Massachusetts and throughout Connecticut. Right. So Central Mass, Western Mass, and throughout all of Connecticut, there's that satellite Springfield faction of the Genovese family.
Okay. And you were born and raised up there, right?
Yeah, I was born here. And, the family goes back to like in the Prohibition days with the bootleg, and the organized crime stories go back to like the early 1900s. Mm-hmm. And then, the Genovese family, it starts like in the 30s with the Mirandas from New York coming up here. And then Big Nose Sam was our boss, and he led it from the 30s all the way up until his death in 83 or 84. Right. And he really ruled with an iron fist, a legendary guy. You don't hear a lot about him. He was at the Appalachian meeting in 57, and so that was, the run of, that's the Springfield faction of the Genovese family.
And a lot of the questions we'll talk about, we kind of know the answers already because we know your story, but were you born into this, or is it something you were exposed to in the neighborhood? Did you have an understanding? Are you generational?
Yeah, so I think being Italian and being a young wise guy getting in trouble, you're kind of born into that life, because back then the mafia was so powerful, the organization, and if you're Italian, you weren't going to join like today. They join these other street gangs, the Latin Kings. You could be Italian and join in the Bloods or the Crips or the other these gangs. Back then, there was only one gang to join, and that was the Italian mafia. So being born in the presence of it, and there was a huge presence in this area, never mind throughout the country back then. The 80s, they had like throughout the country they had mafia families.
Right.
So being born into it, I did have uncles that were involved, and my uncle was the driver for the bus at the time. I had another uncle that was an organized crime guy. My grandmother's brother was a major part of that life. Involved with notorious gangsters that were in Murder Inc. So I grew up in senses of like that. As far as being involved.
So you growing up in Massachusetts or up in Mass, being an Italian guy, you're coming up. You were talking about the other gangs around, but the Italian mob was the strongest. Was there Irish mobs or Albanian mobs or anybody else around that you had confliction with?
So we didn't have any conflict with anybody. The Springfield faction was the most powerful group that was in throughout, I'm going back to the 70s, 80s, 90s. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were the most powerful group, and it wasn't even me. I was a young kid and not even involved yet. There was no other families. Like New York, you have the 5 families. You got the Cavalcantis in Jersey. You got the Philly family close by. With us, there was just one other family, the Patriarcha family, based out of Providence and Boston. And so they were also in Connecticut and parts of Mass, but we got along great with them. And our family was more powerful, being based out of New York. So we were treated a lot, we didn't have no issues with them. There was some issues, that did transpire, but that was basically it with the Patriarchas. There was now the Irish have a big presence in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. I did state prison time. They are organized crime criminals, dangerous individuals, and they're Irish, and they're known throughout the federal system. They're in the federal prison system as being a very violent. They stick together. Same thing. Our Springfield, Worcester, Boston. There's Charlestown. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a heavily Irish presence, and they're organized crime criminals, just like the Italians.
Right.
They're more like what you say. Remember the Westies in New York? Yeah, and they're more involved in robbing banks and armored cars. Mm-hmm. And Charlestown was like the capital of the world and robbing armored cars, and that was all them. Yeah. And so there is a presence of the Irish, and there was no gangs back then. We used to fight with the Spanish and the black gangs and everything, but it wasn't like they were the gangs that they are today. Yeah, it was just neighborhood type fights. Our neighborhood fights, their neighborhood.
So when you were coming up in this, and you start to have an understanding, you're a young age when you had a pretty good understanding of who was what in the neighborhood and who your uncles and your family were. When you're coming up in your time, as you're maybe in your 20s or whenever you start, when was it? Around your 20s when you started to decide that's the life you were going to go?
Yeah, in my late teens. I went to prison at like 20 years old for a state case, 5 years. So when I got out, that's when I joined, I knew I was going to make the money on the streets anyways, but that's when the mafia came to me and asked me to be with them.
Okay. And then what year is this? Just for
91,
the audience.
1991.
Okay, so 91. And again, everybody's still busy up there. Like you said, you have the bank robbers, you have the Irish. Did you cross paths with them at all, or did everybody just stay in their own little areas? Did you have
so sure. When I went to prison at a young age, so I had to do a 5-year sentence, mandatory one. I met the most notorious gangsters throughout the Massachusetts state prison system. So I learned so much in that year that I've learned, and that's when I got out and I hit the streets hard and I got involved in the marijuana business. Okay. And to me, the reason I got involved with that was it was high reward, less risk. Okay. You can make tons of money. The law enforcement wasn't coming after those type of crimes. Yeah. They wanted the cocaine, the heroin, the crack.
Yeah. And again, it goes to being inside, talking about being inside and making all those contacts. When you're in prison, you make those contacts. It's much easier when you come out. You don't have to go into the street and start whispering around. You find solid contacts when you're inside, right?
Well, exactly. Like the first guy, my cellmate, being I was a 20-year-old kid, my first cellie was a guy that was doing natural life, could never get out. So these guys have contacts on the streets.
Yeah.
And, the north end of Boston, is heavily populated with Italians. And so they would introduce me to contacts they had. Don't forget, they've been in there for life.
Yeah.
So now they had made contacts throughout the prison system. They say, hey, go out and see this guy, go out to this restaurant, go see that guy, go to this coffee shop, see them. And that's what I did. I got out in 91 and just hit the streets hard, mostly in the drug business. Okay. And that's when the Springfield faction of Mafia asked me to join with them with no drugs. It was just, the loan shark and the numbers, this gambling.
And your drugs, I mean, where were your suppliers coming from?
So when I got out, I started, I was dealing in cocaine, but I don't consider myself a big dealer, even though I was selling a few kilos a month.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, I would just take those kilos and make them into double and then give them to, wholesale them out to guys. But I didn't even care about that. Marijuana was my big business. Mm-hmm. My contacts were started with the Irish gang with Whitey Bulger and that crew, his gang. And I started buying a few pounds from them. And then like I said, I hit the street so hard. I was good at it. I was buying mostly from Jamaicans, Italians out of New York City, Mexicans. and it got to the point I got so big that I started selling now to the Boston guys, selling to New York, the high end marijuana to New York. And that was like 90% of my business coming home was the marijuana business. And I had contacts with every ethnicity that you could think of in that business. I mean, I was doing business with those Jamaicans that were chopping people up in the 90s in New York City
So you'd get marijuana from the Jamaicans, maybe sell them to other street gang people that were selling dime bags and nickel bags and that?
Yeah, so I dealt in hundreds of pounds.
Okay.
And I didn't waste my time dealing with the small. So if I had a guy that sold 5 pounds a week, I'd leave him 30 pounds. Yeah. So he sells 5, maybe he'll boost it up, but then I have to keep seeing him. And then I would always front it to them and go collect the money, from, as the time went on. Mm-hmm. And it fluctuates. The marijuana goes from anywhere from, say, 400 a pound all the way up to 6,000 a pound. So you have different clientele for each. The Jamaicans had the dirty weed, and I used that. I would, throughout the years, I'd start buying it at 1,300, then 1,000, then 700. 500, and then I'd always put $300-$400 profit on, and I'd give it to one guy. If I got 300 pounds, I'd give 100 to him, 60 to him, 70 to him, 40 to him, and I would just get rid of it wholesale like that. And then you have the higher end, the mid grades, the higher end. So there's all different prices and different. So it was mostly the Jamaicans had the low grade. When you start dealing with, it came from Canada. That was the outdoor.
Arizona had a big. Were you getting it from Arizona?
Yeah. So we used to, eventually we started going right into Mexico, and going across the border and buying it directly from the Mexican cartel. Yeah. And this was back in the 90s, late 90s, when Juarez at the time was like the biggest murder capital of the world back then.
So you drove into Mexico and meet directly with the cartel guy?
So my partner, this guy was great. His name was Dickie. He would actually go into Mexico with $200,000-$300,000 in cash on him. And he would walk into the cartel. He told me about this. Now, don't forget, this is the 90s. We thought the mafia was the only strong organization in the world. Yeah. And he's telling me he goes in there and they got guys on the roofs with machine guns, big warehouses with the weed. He goes in there and picks which ones he wants and labels them. He leaves a deposit, like a few $100,000, and back then you could travel with money, fly with money. They didn't, it wasn't prior to 9/11. Yeah. And then they would transfer it over the border. He said that there was these, like this little thing where a truck could go over, and they would use infrared to see where the border patrol was. And once they didn't see any movement with infrared, the SUVs would come flying over this little like river part. And then he would be on the house on the other side of the border and the U.S. side. Then he would package it up and put a couple mules on the road and, get it back to the East Coast. Right. And that's when we made a real lot of money. Oh, yeah. Because now we're getting it directly from the cartels. The only thing you're paying is the mules to come, which is nothing. And we're putting 300-400 pounds at a time in the vehicle.
Did you guys ever get robbed or get hit or?
I've never been robbed in my life, period. There was an arrest coming back. One of the mules got arrested I think it was Michigan with, I think it was like 300 pounds. And It's a nothing charge because they can't prove, you know, it's interstate. You know, you get caught in Michigan. All right. So you bought it in Michigan. They're not knowing that you bought it, you know, in another state. And marijuana is a nothing, you know, charge unless they tie you with a, you know, an organization and maybe there's some violence going on and the racketeering laws come in. But, you know, someone is just doing it like that. Like in Massachusetts, the laws was 50 pounds and under is a misdemeanor.
Right.
Oh, wow.
You don't go to prison.
Yeah. Right.
I got caught with 40 pounds in 1996. I was in district court, misdemeanor charge, you know, facing nothing. And I ended up beating the case.
Yeah.
So it's like I said, the risk reward, you make millions of dollars in that business, millions, and you don't get law enforcement scrutiny. You know, the informants go up to the law enforcement and says, hey, what's Anthony do? Oh, he's selling marijuana. All right, forget
big
him.
Deal.
No matter.
You know, they want the cocaine. Back then it was crack. Crack was becoming big.
But I want to say before we move on to a different topic, the Jamaicans, you struck a chord in me when you talked about, I haven't thought about the Jamaicans because I was on a job in the 90s. And you said something and we brushed over it. They were violent. The ones out of New York. And when you said they were ones chopping people up, I just want the audience to understand, like dealing with the Jamaican drug dealers back then. And I remember going into the houses, and I don't know if you experienced the same thing. It was all garbage bags. It was just packed and jammed into garbage bags, black garbage bags.
Like dirty weed. We call it the dirt weed, the bottom of the barrel. I mean, they did have some green, but it was always compressed hard. You know, so they would give you like a 30-pound bale, but it was so compressed.
It was junk.
Small.
It was junk, but the thing was, they were so violent. Did you deal with them direct, or did your guys?
Oh no, me directly. I did all. See, you know, I came home as a young kid, so I did all this myself. I made all these contacts while I was on parole. I violated parole twice for violent attacks, but my drug business went through the roof, and I had all the contacts. So I made contacts with these Jamaicans. I had them in my house. They brought their kids into my house. We made a jewelry score one time, $400,000 or $500,000 jewelry score, and I said, "Here, pick out." It was on my bed. Yeah. My wife is there. My kids, their wife, their kids. I go pick out some stuff for your wife, and he goes, "Really, man?" You know, they were like, I got along super cool. So. Really? When I got arrested that time, it was their marijuana in New York. Okay. So I told him, I said, listen, I got hit with a 40-something pounds. You know, I got to get a lawyer to go see if you can squash. You know, I owed them. If they gave me like 200-300 pounds at a time, but I had already sold some. So I owed them some money. Okay. So my guy calls up the guy in New York. He says, hey, man, we need to do my friend a favor. And this guy's talking that Jamaican, real deep Jamaican. Man, I cut the motherfucker head off. I killed him. No, man, this guy cool. This guy. Anyways, I didn't have to pay them a penny for that. They, you know, for that thing right there. And I'm still like a young kid, you know, like, you know, they could have chopped me up. You know,
that's why I'm asking, because they were pretty violent back then. So you had to have a good rapport with them. Yeah. We're going to take a break real quick and stop. And then when we come back, we'll jump into how you met Al Bruno, or how Al Bruno decided to bring you into his crew. So we're just going to take a real quick break. We'll be right back with Anthony. All right, Anthony, we're back from break. We were talking about your marijuana business in the street, your drug business in the street, and how you were earning money. At some point, I would imagine you got the attention of some guys that were hooked up guys, and Al Bruno being one of them, right?
Right.
Was that how you were noticed by him? Did you know him before, or the guys in the organized crime, the Italians, did they know what you were doing in the street?
So I grew up in Springfield. I knew him since a little kid. Yeah. You know, he's a distant relative on my mother's side. He was always coming into my father's store. Yeah. So I knew about him, all about, you know, when I started getting in trouble in my teens, violent assaults, and I got caught with a gun case and a shooting case. I had to go to prison for it. When I got out in 91, there was two mobsters, Anthony DeLavo, who became a boss in Springfield faction, and Al Bruno. They both wanted me to be with them. I was close with both of them. They used to come to my family's house and eat dinner at my father's store. But Al Bruno was the one who approached me into my house, and he asked if I wanted to be on record officially with the Genovese faction, Springfield faction of the Genovese family. I said yes. He went to his boss, Sky Balshabelli, and they officially put me on the record and that's how I started, you know, being, you know, an associate on record with the Genovese family in 1991.
And is it safe to say that the reason why he wanted to rush to get you in under him was because he saw you earning money in the street? It didn't matter how you were doing it. He just saw you as a good earner. He saw you as a capable kid, right? Somebody that you're not going to take any BS.
At that time, don't forget, they don't get involved with drugs.
Right. That's why,
He didn't look at me as far as I was definitely capable. I had I was intelligent. Like, he knew I had the smarts, the street smart, and I went to prison for a violent case. I had the violent instinct in me. So I was capable. And, what they do is they groom. They start you off, all right, we're going to start doing some sports gambling and some loan sharking and the number business. And we had casino nights. And, if you got to go throw someone a beating. So that's how, I was capable with him.
Right.
He had no knowledge of the marijuana money that I was making and the drug money, and we were hijacking trucks. He had nothing to do with that, robbing jewelers and things like that. The mafia didn't get a piece of any of that from me. So he had no idea. When they went back and told the mafia guys, which they did, young kids would go back and say, what's Anthony do? Oh, he's selling marijuana. They don't know that there was millions of dollars involved in that. And they're not allowed to get involved in the drug business. They consider that narcotics.
Yes. Yeah. But you're earning the money in the street. You have your book. And then at what point did you decide, or what point did they decide they wanted to propose you?
So I got proposed like pretty much immediately around 93, 94.
Wow. Okay.
And that means, you know what that means? I was going to become a MAID member. And at this time, I'm in my early 20s still, mid-20s.
Right.
And I'm getting closer now. I'm doing more things with them. We got a big sports book, big loan sharking book. And I'm doing so many things that I could get killed for. I'm selling large amounts of drugs, mostly marijuana, cocaine. I'm involved in hijacking trucks. And, the streets have ears, and they go and they end up hearing all these things, you know?
Right.
And I always denied it. I said, I'm not selling drugs and I'm not involved in any of that. Come 1996, my house gets raided and I officially get caught with marijuana in my house, 40 pounds of marijuana and some ammunition. And that's almost got me killed. Bruno wanted to kill me because they thought he was involved. His bosses thought maybe he was involved with me since I was on record with him. And I'm supposed to tell him everything, him everything. So I got banished and put on the shelf for 2 years.
Yep.
So 1996 to 98, I'm on the shelf. I'm making more money than I did being around mobsters, and I have less heat, and I'm meeting more mobsters throughout New York, Providence, Boston, all throughout the country, Connecticut. And
while you're shelved.
While I'm shelved.
So I want to take a pause there for our audience. We all know, the three of us know what shelved means, but for the explanation, when you get shelved, it's safe to say that, it's a timeout, right? You get a timeout. It's not always, you don't always get shelved. Shelved means you have the chance to earn your way back, right? You can make it right. You can earn a little bit. You can make it.
It's like being working for a corporation and getting fired.
Yeah.
But with the mafia, it's like
they're not going to whack you out.
Contacts.
Right.
If they own restaurants, you're not allowed to come into the restaurant. And we owned them all around here in Springfield.
Right.
But what I did was I always went outwards anyways.
Yeah.
And so I was shelved, but I had the biggest crew. I had the biggest and most violent and money. All my guys, I made millionaires out of. So we were very lucrative in money, very violent. I had the most violent guys. So you couldn't shelf a guy like me.
Right.
My presence was just too big. I just went elsewhere and outwards.
Right.
And my presence, it helped me networking outwards into Connecticut more, further into Mass, going in east towards Boston, going into New York City. I met under bosses that were all selling marijuana, captains in the banana market that were selling marijuana. So it was like I was making so much money, outwards. And the shelving part didn't do nothing to me. Yeah, locally, I didn't go into Bruno's restaurant.
Right.
And I didn't go into his son's restaurant. Big deal.
Well, that's my question. When you were shelved, you were like, so it's almost like, oh, you want to shelf me? So now I have a broad spectrum where I can go. I'll show you. I'll go earn. So now, fuck it, right? It's that attitude of now, okay, I'll go do my own thing.
All the time. They didn't stop my earning power. And, so like shelving me. And I was still doing loan sharking. I was still doing all the mob rackets. I was just, loaning money out on the outskirts, doing sports business on the outskirts. I was a big gambler. I was betting on with bookmakers throughout the, Northeast.
Yeah.
And so my crimes did not stop one bit, even though I was under indictment for the marijuana case.
Yeah.
That case got dismissed in 98. And that's when Bruno come out of prison in 98. And he wanted me to come back around him. He asked me if I was done dealing drugs. I said yes, which I wasn't. I kept, still selling marijuana. If they knew how much money was involved,
they'd jump in.
They would have got, the local Springfield faction would have got involved. New York was involved.
Yeah.
I don't know how much the Genovese family was, but the other families were involved in the marijuana business and cocaine.
Now, when you got made, are you comfortable talking about the process and the ceremony?
Yeah.
So when you got made, you're proposed. Who proposed you for membership?
So I got proposed by Bruno again I beat that case in 98, 99. And now don't forget, I know a lot of people now. So Bruno's bringing me back around. I'm going to New York. I'm going to Chin Gigante's, families' homes and restaurants. I'm going to high-ranking captains. And a lot of these people I already know from my dealings being shelved, meeting them. And we're pretending we don't even know each other. We're meeting for the first time. I used to go to Rayo's, and the guys that were in the marijuana business, I would see them in there. Now I'm sitting at a boss table, at Rayo's. We're all bosses in New York. I got the boss from the Patriarchas with us, him and his brother. I got our faction in Springfield, the New York faction. And then I got guys that I sell marijuana from the Lucchese family, from the Bonanno family, coming up and saying hello to me.
Right.
And I'm trying to get them away from me because these guys are going to be like, how you know this guy? How you know that guy? Oh, I sell drugs with them, And so I met so many people, being shelved and coming back around that 2000. So Bruno proposes me leading up into now, and then Bruno becomes boss of the Springfield faction in 2001. So there was a couple of guys that they were going to get made in Springfield faction throughout Connecticut. There was like 7.
Yeah.
He added me to the list. So I was going to get proposed under Bruno, but I never ended up getting made under Bruno. So I started meeting the bosses in New York, and they took a really liking to me. They were sending guys up. They see how I operated in our area, Connecticut and Mass. I had the biggest crew. I had nightclubs, restaurants. I had all the guys around me. I had the violent guys, the money guys, making tons of money. So when these guys from New York came up, I take them out. Of course, they've seen Bruno, but then they were with me the rest of the night till 4 a.m. Right. So they see the crew I got and everything going on. So they're taking a liking to me. And there was a shift in the New York family, Genovese family, the New York part of it, where the Chin was in jail, Quiet Don was the boss, he was in prison, and they were using a panel of 3 guys. One of them, Ernie Muscarella, was going to go to a prison. He puts this guy, Artie Nigro, on his spot.
Right.
The other 2 bosses, Mario Gigante and Larry Dentico from New Jersey faction, they didn't want Artie there, but Ernie was a very powerful captain, boss. He was going to prison. He wanted him there. So Artie takes over. And Artie knew all about me, and because he had a guy that was an informant around him. Okay. And that informant used to come up, so he knew all about me. And so Artie is the guy that ended up proposing me, making me into the family. Yeah. I had to shoot, I had to do a hit for him out in New York City before that. Okay. But that's who proposed me and made me, was Artie Nigro.
So in the proposal, and again, I know. Let's walk through it step by step for the audience, because again, this is a unique opportunity for us at the museum to talk to a guy like you. And everybody has their understanding, and everybody's watched TV shows and documentaries. I really want them to get a perspective of what it's like to be made. Propose, number 1, you go on a list, and you mention a list, right? So for everybody watching and listening, you get on that list. That list is taken to the other Borgatas, am I correct? Like, you go around and they ask, do you have a problem with, like, your Anthony? No, I don't have a problem with him. They move on to the next, right?
So, there's different levels. So you can get proposed, and back in the day, you had to participate in a hit, in a murder. 90% of the people did. Yeah. So being proposed don't mean you're automatically going to get made. There's going to be a time, especially in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, when someone's going to get whacked, and they're going to come to you, and you might be the driver of the car, you might be the shooter, you might be the guy that got rid of the body, but you're going to participate in some way. And when you do that, that's when you're going to be the guy when that list is ready and the proposed members are ready. You're going to get that button. Yeah. You're going to get made.
They're going to open up the books and that'll be it.
Right. And so, yes, they do pass around. Once you get to that level, say they're going to get ready to make you quick. They did pass around a list to the other families. Our family stopped doing it because there was so many infiltration with informants.
Right. You don't want to tell
guys
your business.
Were flipping. And so the Genovese family cut ties, in the early 2000s with all the other families. Okay. They didn't share who the made guys were. They didn't, and then after you're made, you're supposed to go around and be introduced to everybody. Yeah, correct. So they didn't do that. Only with our internal family and with guys they thought worthy, that were worthy of meeting us. Okay. They kind of like just stayed to themselves and redid everything instead of passing around the list. They stopped doing that. Okay.
Yeah, because I experienced the same thing. A couple of guys got made and they weren't going around. They introduced them, right? And like you said, and we'll get to that in a second, but they presented you to the upper echelon, to the administration. and introduced you as that.
And they all
was it.
know you.
They all know.
The history.
Yeah. And then they let
they know what you did.
the chatter goes, and everybody knows you got made. And because
like with me, the bosses loved us because we did a hit for them in the streets of New York City.
Okay.
So it was like they ordered the hit, so they definitely know that this crazy Springfield faction, young guys coming up, have violence. They can commit violence. They got money. They control the whole, Western Mass, Central Mass, and Connecticut. So of course they knew about us and they loved us. They loved me and my crew.
So let's talk about, before we get into the ceremony, let's talk about the hit. Let's talk about, if we can get into that, let's break that down. What did it look like?
Sure. So I get called to New York, and like I said, Artie Niger's the boss now, and he wants to build a little loyal crew within, that's loyal to him in the Springfield, Connecticut faction. There was some fighting going on with him. Bruno's the boss now, so Bruno doesn't even know that Artie's the acting boss of the Genovese family for our, Western Mass, Connecticut, and the Bronx.
Okay.
So he's got this guy that's an informant around him named John Bologna. John Bologna is coming up. We get word for it. We can get into that some other time, but I asked permission to kill John Bologna. Artie protected him and didn't allow us to kill John Bologna. It did come out that John was an informant. So Artie summons me down, calls me down to New York, down the Bronx. John Bologna is there, the informant, and he tells me he wants me to kill this union guy that had some beef with him. He was with Lucchese family. There was some sort of beef going on, and he wanted me to kill the guy. He wanted me to use two guys in the Springfield faction, Joey Bazil and Reno Saravolo, because they were on the list to get made. Joey Bazil's an informant. He ran away. He testified at a grand jury, and Reno was just, I don't blame him. There was a lot of stuff going on. Anyways, I go and get my two other guys that were in my crew, the two Greek kids, and we go down, and Artie, the boss, tells me where the guy parks, where he gets out of his, goes to his car every day at 6 a.m. to go to work. And so we set up shop. It took us, one time we did a dry run. The second time the guy didn't come out of his apartment. The third time we're there. So he was coming out of his apartment. We're sitting on the bench. I said, there he is. We pick up the guns. We had the guns in like a little brush area to the right of us in case the cops pulled us, sitting us, on the streets of New York. They said, what are you guys doing? So the guns were to the side. We grabbed the guns. Me and the kid Ty grabbed the guns. His brother Freddie was the getaway driver. So we see the guy coming. By the time we get to his car, he's just sitting into his driver's seat. We come up to the driver's side window and just start pumping shots into the driver's side window. And he was hit 9 times.
Okay.
From his, chest up.
Wow. Okay.
That was that had to be a big decision in your life, right? I mean, you're agreeing to commit murder. That's probably going to push you forward, but there had to be a little part of you at least that was probably like, I don't know if I should do this, right?
Yeah. So part of me definitely, I even said, why don't we give the guy a beating? We have to drive with silencers to come down to New York. We'll get 20, 30 years just for that with our records,
right.
Our criminal records. And so I asked, and I believe John Bologna was the instigator, informant and all this, because I asked Artie, I said, you want to just us to give this guy a good beating, baseball bat beating? And I think Artie was maybe going to go along with that, but then John said, no, he just gave the order, kill him. So, going down there, the biggest, killing the guy wasn't on my conscience or it was getting away with it and, doing a hit like that, getting caught, because now you're going to look at, the rest of your life in prison.
Right.
So that changes everything. I always said, the life isn't bad until you can participate in the murders.
Yeah.
Once you participate in the murder, it's over.
Right.
Everything is different now, because you're not looking at those 2-year sentences, for, bookmaking and loan sharking with no violence. You don't even go to prison for that stuff.
Right.
But once the violence comes in, especially the murder, your life changes.
Yeah.
So, that's exactly what happened. It's like, doing the deed. We've done so many violent acts that, killing somebody, we've come close to killing people dozens of times in life, throughout shootings and stabbings and things like that. But so, doing the piece of work was just another day at work.
Right. Another step.
But, the risk was driving to New York, 2 hours
Yeah.
there with silencers, and then driving back, getting away with it on the streets of New York.
Right.
Like today, you couldn't pull that hit off.
Right.
With all the
No,
cameras.
cameras. Yeah. Now you jump right back in the car and off you go. He died there instantly, I would imagine, right?
So we jump in the car. We look. He said he's dead. His head was back. Blood was pouring out. Miraculously, he gets out of. He faked his death. He sees us take off, and he gets out of the car, and he makes it to his Bronx apartment, and he's yelling to his wife because he can't find his phone. And the wife sees him. She goes, "What's the matter?" He goes, "Call the ambulance. I've been shot." And he passes out.
Okay.
They bring him to the hospital. The next day, we get word he's dead. And, but come to find out, he's not dead, and he makes a recovery. So he ends up not dying. He gets hit 9 times. 2 of the bullets are still in him at this time. He came on a podcast and actually spoke about it.
Yeah.
And he told the story about exactly what happened, his version.
Okay.
And that's how I know those details. And especially he testified in court too, but I didn't hear that. I seen him in the thing. But so miraculously he survived. I don't know how.
Yeah.
Because just picture, he gets into the driver's side and you're shooting
Shoulder
into him
up.
this way.
Yeah. You're shooting down into him.
They're not hitting him in his foot.
No.
Yeah, right.
No. Yeah, they're going into his upper body.
Miraculously, the guy survived.
Did he know you did it?
Nobody knew. It was like a perfectly planned hit. The bad thing about it was the informant that already had with him, John Bologna, knew we did it.
Yeah. You would have gotten
Law
away.
enforcement thought Albanians did it.
Mm-hmm.
They were the ones getting the blame for it.
Yeah.
Because at that time there was a lot of Albanian
Outsourcing.
crazy stuff going on with that, and they thought that they might have pulled it off. But yeah, no, we didn't have any heat on that at all.
Wow. And what about the fact that he didn't die? You carried out the hit, but just the fact that you carried it out, he survived it, and that was enough. They took it as, because again, you proposed to baseball bat him. That would have been just as effective as what happened, right? So now when you get back and they find out he survived, was it just like, oh, well, the effort was there, so we're good?
100%.
Okay.
So if it was a hit, like we were taking out a boss, or a high-ranking captain that was a dangerous, they're going to tell you, you don't leave until you put them kill shots in his head.
Right.
This guy was a union boss. He wasn't a violent mobster. He was just running one of the unions, and he was the boss of one of the unions. And so it wasn't like he had a crew and he was a mafia guy in that respect.
Okay.
So once they seen that we came down and shot this guy and did that type of hit, regardless of if he lived or died, we still carried the hit out. They loved us.
Message received, and you did your part. You proved your loyalty and your worth, and that was that. So that's a wild ride. That's crazy.
Yeah, and that was in New York. Never in mind what I proved growing up in my own area, Springfield and Connecticut. All the reputation I built up there.
Okay.
That doesn't count. New York don't know about that.
Right.
They only hear that about things.
We're going to take another break and come back, and then we'll touch on the ceremony, and we'll get into the actual ceremony and what happened there. Okay. So we'll be right back.
Sure.
So we're back with Anthony Arillotta. We appreciate you, Anth, and this is a wild ride you're taking us on. So after this shooting is done, this union guy is hit. You go back to Springfield, and now you proposed and you're made. Can you walk us through the ceremony briefly and what it's like to be a made guy?
Yeah. So because of that hit, I participated in a murder, assassination. I get called down to New York now, not by the Springfield faction, by the bosses of New York. And I don't, I'm not supposed to know why I'm going there. I go to a restaurant. I meet other captains in the family, the Genovese family. They tell me to take my jewelry off, my beeper, my phone, put it over there. The guy, one of the captains, whisper in my ear, when you go over there, make sure when they ask you, do you know why you're here? You say no. There was 4 of us that got made that day in the Genovese family. They took us out 2 at a time. They drive you to this like Bronx apartment. The first 2 went. They come back. They get us. Then us 2 go now. Me and this kid, Ralphie Balsamo. So we go into the apartment. They tell us to strip down in our boxers, put a bathrobe on. They walk us out into the room one at a time. There's a gun and a knife on the table. Boss, Pat DeLuca and Artie Niger are sitting at the table. Artie's the boss. There's captains all around, standing, though, not at the table. There's a gun and a knife. They ask you which trigger finger you pull your trigger with. They prick it with like a knife pin, and the blood comes out. They put it on a saint. They light it. They light it on your fire in your hand, and you repeat after them, pledge allegiance to the family. You wipe it off with your hands, and then they tell you some rules. If the family comes first. If we ask you to kill your brother, will you kill your brother? No matter what, the family comes first. They don't deal drugs. They don't deal in counterfeit money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a 10-minute ceremony. They get up, they kiss you on the cheek after, hello, friend. And now you're a friend of ours. That's how it goes.
Okay. You made your way through as a May guy now and started putting the team together, and you eventually become a capo, right? What year did you become a capo?
Well, so I already had my team together.
You did.
And once I got made, it made me the most powerful guy as like a boss outside of New York.
Okay.
So I was the guy that the bosses went to. I was the
facilitator
outside of New York.
Right.
Yeah.
You had a facilitator.
And reason is because of the hit I carried out,
Mm-hmm.
and also I was made in New York City. And so, I already had my team together. I already had my guys, my networking, all businesses, restaurants, money-making crimes and everything. So I was the most powerful guy now because I was made directly in New York City.
Okay.
And, Bruno was still the boss of Springfield faction, but he was going to be taken down within the next coming weeks.
Okay. You knew about that he was going to meet his
him.
demise? Okay.
No, he was just going to get demoted,
Okay.
taken down, another term,
Yep.
and he was going to get put from a boss to a soldier, and they were going to prop this other guy up, Felix Stringese, as a lightning rod, so law enforcement would think he's the boss, and then I would have all the power in the background.
Okay.
I would call all the shots.
Right.
And so that's how it was going to go down. It didn't work out like that because during a sentencing, 302 came out on Al Bruno that he was talking to the FBI. One of the made guys in our Springfield faction got more time because of it. He put a beef into New York, and instead of taking Al Bruno down, New York ordered to kill Al Bruno.
Okay. He's gone. He's gone now, right? And that leaves kind of you.
So the order came down to kill him. Yep,
right.
And we killed Al Bruno. And there was some other murders that happened in that time frame, and there was murder conspiracies going on. It was a wild time in 2003.
Right.
There was multiple murders, murder conspiracies. I was actually made. I was the most powerful guy there. Bruno got killed in 2003, and I just stayed in power. I became the most powerful guy. Once I got made in New York City, like I said, I was the most powerful guy outside of New York.
And then law enforcement had their beat on you, right? You became the target of law enforcement investigations?
So like I said, once they knew I was involved in multiple murders.
Yeah.
And so once you do the murder, law enforcement comes at you hard.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere I went, there was listening devices in my vehicles, houses, my guys' houses, restaurants I go to, strip clubs I go to, businesses I go to. They had every phone's wired and tapped. So I pick up 3 cases from 2003 to 2005.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I plead guilty to in 2005. I get 3 to 3.5 years in the state. I get 29 months in the feds. I'm doing my time. I get indicted again while I'm doing my time in 2007. I get extortion charge. I go to trial on that, and I get found not guilty. Now I'm wrapping up my sentence in 2008, and I get out in 2008.
Okay.
And, like I said, the murder changes everything. Once you murder, you're not going to get that law enforcement scrutiny off your back.
Yeah.
And so I became like the John Gotti of Springfield, Western Mass, and Connecticut.
Okay.
That's like the scrutiny I had on me, as far as law enforcement went. I was like public enemy number 1, and me and my crew, public enemy number 1.
And you did you know that? Is it safe to say you kind of knew they were looking at you? Did you know your demise would come eventually? Were you comfortable with it? And you're like, listen, I'm just going to ride this wave for as long as I can?
When I beat the case in 2008, I would have got 20 years for that. So
Yeah.
I figure, maybe there's a shot I'm going to beat this.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, that guy that was an informant, John Bologna, come back to find
Right.
out John Bologna goes into the witness protection program, and he was wearing a wire on everybody.
Okay.
So I was out for 2 years, like till 2010. I thought maybe I was going to be able to skate through, and I was pretty much done with the crimes that, keep putting you back in jail. I was going legitimately in the lucrative garbage business, the nightclub business, the strip club business, and, real estate business. And that's where my focus was. And so, but I didn't have a chance because Bologna.
Yeah, you had that position as a boss, and you didn't have to go out there in the street anymore. So you really were in a position where you could kick back and just.
But what happens with the bosses they tie everything back to you. So it's even worse. You got to sever ties and insulate yourself even more.
Right.
So if you're going to be involved in the sports gambling, you can't even though you're boss, you're not doing the work, but you can't even go and say, where's my end? You got to put somebody else up, insulate yourself, and let them have that. And then, come and see you, one trusted guy or whatever. But you don't even need that money. There was so much money legitimately. You don't even need that street money, because once you become a boss and like the networking that you can do legally in construction, the concrete business, the unions, like I said, all those other businesses I said, you can make millions and millions of dollars legally, legitimately. And that's what you see them doing today.
Yeah, but it's hard to get there, right? When you're in that life, it's tough to get there because everything you've done up to that point. And again, from an investigative point of view, the government come at you with a historical case. They can go back decades. They can find a guy and flip on you from decades ago. So all that stuff comes back to bite you in the ass. And then that was the deciding factor when you decided, okay, you know what? I'm done. When they approached you, how did that go? Did they come to the house? Did they approach you in the street?
So 2010, I find out the guy, John, was an informant. And, we asked permission to kill him. Artie was protecting him for some reason. Yeah. Now, you know how the stories go. These bosses flip today. Why was Artie protecting him? Anyways, I knew I was going to get indicted. I finally, I get a lawyer out of New York that represented John Mitchell, very good attorney. So I was going to fight my case. It was a death penalty case. Yeah. And finally, I get indicted. When I get indicted, I find out all the cooperating witnesses against us, dozens of them, dozens. And then in the murder, they have 4 direct guys involved in the murder. They had the shooter, Frankie Roach, was cooperating. They had Felix Tringhese. He's the guy that got the order to kill Bruno. They had John Bologna wearing the wire. And they had a captain out of Florida, Ray Ruggiero, that robbed Bruno for $250,000 that was testifying about the murder. We were dead. It wasn't 99.9%. It was 100% we're going to jail for the rest of our life. But I still didn't think about cooperating until my lawyer from New York comes up, John Mitchell, and tells me New York bosses are worried sick. I said, why? Artie Nigro is not in the system. Now, Artie Nigro was the boss, and he was doing 5 years at Fort Dix. So when he got indicted, and I have a federal marshal, that's my partner, that was actually the guy in that case back then. And so he'll even testify to this. But Artie Nigro the marshal brings Artie Nigro. He goes missing in the system. So the lawyer tells me Artie's not in the system. Right. We can't find him. This is going on for like a month. How does his family not know where he is? How does his lawyers not know where he is? How does nobody? So they thought he flipped. I said, well, if the New York bosses are worried sick, what do you think I should be? I'm second on the indictment to a death penalty case. And they said, well, sit back. So now I get transferred out of Rhode Island. That's when it hit my head. I don't have no chance at all. Nothing, like this and that. I got lucky that the case was out of New York. Yeah. So, they're used to guys, looking at, multiple murders and cooperating and getting, a decent break on their sentence. So that's what happened. I ended up reaching out. But before I reached out to my guys. I was in Rhode Island. So there was 3 guys that were around me. The 2 brothers, Freddie Ty and the kid Emilio. I reached out and told them, I said, listen, guys, I seen all the evidence. We're dead. We're going to go to jail for the rest of our lives. It was a death penalty case, but they ain't going to give us death. So we're going to go to jail for the rest of our lives. There's 4 of us, 3 of us, me and 3 other guys from our area. I said, they wouldn't let us kill John Bologna. Artie's not in the system. I go, let's make a deal, cooperate. We'll stick together. It'll be like the mass faction, and we're going to be going against New York. We're all killers. We're all very capable of shooting. If it comes down to it and we got to go out and shoot them, we'll come back to our area. We all got kids. We all got families. Let's just get the fuck out of this life and come back to our area. So I sent word to them. Now I get transferred to New York. Artie's still not in the system. They bring me to Brooklyn. I get to MCC, and I'm with the bosses in New York. Danny Leo comes up to me and said they finally found Artie. He's in Brooklyn, MCC. Now, the marshal, when I talked to this day, picked him up at Fort Dix, dropped him off at MCC. So where did he go for that month? And how did he end up at an MDC? Right. So I believe Artie tried to flip. Okay. And he did what John Gotti Jr. did. And they didn't take his, proffer. Right. And so, because a lot of guys want to tell on this and leave that out. Right. Because, they have friends involved or they don't want to talk about a certain murder. Yeah. So anyways, I made a deal with the government. And that's what made me flip on the case, which was a very, very, very hard decision. Right. And I look back today, looking back and I'm saying, why was it so hard? You know, the brainwashing growing up, you know,
Right.
believing in that life and all that. It was like, we're brainwashed. Dude, they're looking to give me a second chance in life.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about it,
Right.
you know, like,
Yeah.
you know, they don't just do that to anybody. You're not
No.
going to give somebody, you know, that's facing a death penalty a second chance of life. You got to be something very powerful in some very powerful organization to get that type of deal. And I'm like debating on whether I'm going to take it. And I almost didn't take it. Thank God I did, and I'm out here today.
Wow. And you mentioned proffer, and just for our audience, we do a lot of breakdown of terminologies, but a proffer is when your attorneys reach out to the prosecutors, the U.S. attorneys, they sit down, you sit in a room with them, or in that case, it was the other guy who sat down with them, Nigro, or whoever it was, and they vomit all the stuff on them. You have to tell them everything you did. You can't leave one thing out when you do a proffer. When you sign on to the government, you're going to cooperate. If you forget one thing, you can't come back and say, "Oh, I forgot that." They can use it against you later on. So I can only imagine when you're sitting there doing
you could forget something as long as it's something small.
Yeah.
Like, you know, oh, I forgot
I killed that guy.
I was selling some marijuana to some guy in Michigan. I forgot about that guy.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But when it comes to the murders and the violence like that, and you're going to never forget that. So
Right.
it ain't like you forgot it. You're just not.
You omitted
bringing
it
up.
for a
So
reason.
yeah, you have to 100%. It's the violence and everything.
Right.
But the proffer is, you know, you can do an attorney proffer. And that's how I ended up, you know, they reached out to my attorney. And so when I returned back with an attorney to reach back out, they were in shock that I even did that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's exactly what it is. You can go in there and talk about crimes. They can't use what you say against you, but they still have to okay you.
Yeah.
You know, they have to okay you for the proffer. They don't accept everybody.
Right.
There's a lot of guys. Anthony Picasso, he got, you know, even the lying guy in my case, John Bologna, he ended up getting thrown out because he lied and he was an informant, lying, not telling them everything. So Frank Salemi, in that case with the Patriarchas, he got caught up in not telling them about a murder. Yeah, so you have to, the proffer, you go in, they can't use it against you. You have to tell them if they think you have some good information that you're viable to get that type of break in life.
Right.
Then yes, they'll say, okay, we want to meet with you again and have you cooperate.
Okay.
What happened to John, the original informant? Did he end up going to prison on the indictment, or did someone whack him out, or where'd he go?
So he was wearing a watch, and he was an informant since the 90s. We got warned by the Gambino bosses and the Patriarcha family. That's why I said Artie wouldn't let us take him out. So that's why I believe Artie was dirty with him.
Yeah.
But John, when he was dealing with the FBI, he doesn't tell him about that shooting in New York. So he tells him about the Bruno murder. He doesn't know about another murder and murder conspiracies I'm involved in, but he tells him about them, but they can't prove it on me because he didn't know nothing about them, right? So he does it. So when I end up cooperating, I end up telling them, I go, you know, I know this guy is your prize guy, golden goose. He's your informant. You guys built a case around him. He's the guy that caused all the problems in our area. Him and Artie Nigro destroyed the mafia outside of New York in Western Mass and everything by having the greed. They were trying to steal all the money, siphon it back down to New York. The John Bologna being an informant, causing all the dissension amongst us, interfamily, Springfield faction. So he doesn't tell him about this murder. I said, well, if he's such your golden goose, he caused all this trouble. How come I'm not indicted for a shooting in New York? Yeah. And that's exactly how it started. And
he lost all his credibility then, didn't he?
Exactly. So once I did that, they went. Now he was on the street. He wasn't even going to do a day in prison. So they go and grab him and they said, hey, John, we want to take you and put you into prison just in case when you get sentenced, you got to do a little time. So they put him in Allenwood, right? Federal prison. And now they come back to him now and they say, hey, listen, we feel like you're leaving some stuff out. Is there anything you want to tell us? And he says, no. So now they go back to him again and they said, listen, we know about that. He goes, oh, I had a stroke. I've lost some of my memory. I forgot about all that and blah, 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 blah. So now they rip up his deal. Instead of doing no time, he ends up getting less time than me. I got 89 months. I got 99 months, 8.5 years. He got 8 years, but he died in prison. He never made it out.
You mentioned Frank Salemi. It made me think of Whitey Bulger. Can you discuss any dealings with Whitey? Or
I didn't meet him. I was in his presence in South Boston. He was the most notorious boss, very dangerous. I was in prison with the most dangerous Irish guys. Nobody would cross him. He would kill you with a knife. He would kill you with a gun. He would go on the hits himself. He was a dangerous mob boss. He was working with the feds, but you know, the story goes the feds had to use him to put him as an informant. They were using anyways. It comes out in 1996. He goes on the run. 95, 96 goes on the run. He's gone. They catch him in 2011.
Right.
And while he's in prison, one of my guys that was in my crew ends up killing him while he was in prison.
And that was Gaius, right? Yeah.
In West Virginia.
Right.
But he was a dangerous individual. Anybody that can tell you, you know, any stories about him, they would never say anything to his face.
Right.
And, you know, when the guy did kill him, he was 90 years old in a wheelchair.
Right.
If he was in his 60s, that wouldn't have happened.
Really?
Like that. But yeah, very dangerous, notorious gangster. The Hill Gang, Somerville, South Boston. And they had
they did.
Johnny Martirano killed 20-something people.
They were crazy.
Notorious.
They were out of their minds. Yeah. Hey, Ann, what's life like for you now?
Right now, I'm blessed and grateful that I have a second chance in life. I was doing a little real estate. I have my own wine business out called Pazzo, P-A-Z-Z-O.
Yeah.
The link is in my Instagram, Anthony Bengi Arillotta. I have a book out, if you can see behind me, South End Syndicate. It describes the outside of New York, Connecticut, Western Mass factions of the crime families that existed from the 20s all the way up to my time there.
Yeah.
And I believe my time put us on the map, but I don't think it should have. I think that there were so many notorious gangsters to come out of our area that they should have been acknowledged way before. But you never hear. You hear about New York, Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, the bigger cities.
Right.
So, you know, I just to shed light on, you know, the notorious gangsters in the area. We had an empire within an empire. That's all.
Yeah, you did.
And John Bologna and Artie Nigro destroyed it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, we touched on so much. There's so much more we could talk to you about, but this has been a great episode to sit down with you and get the perspective of a made guy, the ceremony and everything that you offered from the life, right? We don't have that opportunity often, but, you know, Anthony, we really appreciate you coming out and being there, you know, remotely with us today and sharing these stories. And, you know, again, you have a second chance at life here and a redemption.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me. And it was a great show.
Thanks for coming on, Anthony.
You.
Thanks.
For behind-the-scenes photos, merchandise, and exclusive content, visit InsideTheLife.org. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get podcasts.